second step, getting the tool ready to analyze the material. This is the codebook thing, which pretty much is like a survey for survey research. For content analysis, we're writing a codebook, and we'll look at that very briefly. And the third step, assess the quality of the tool. So does your codebook actually work? And here we talk particularly about reliability assessments. And then you do the analysis when you have the data. So coding, develop a coding scheme. Again, this is like surveys for survey research, right? And I believe in the links that were sent around last week to you, there were also links to examples of code books that have been used in analysis. Just to have a look, and some of them are sometimes very elaborate descriptions of what's happening. You develop this coding scheme, and we'll look at a bit of an example in a second. And then you need to make sure that your coders understand the coding scheme, the definitions, instructions that you have been writing in the same way as your intention was when you've been writing them. You know, it's like asking a survey question and making sure that it's valid, that you get information that you wanted to get about certain aspects. And that's sometimes not that easy. And there's more difficult and easier things. So you develop this coding scheme, and then at some point, of course, you employ your coders. That's often students, for instance, that we're using to analyze materials. You should also, maybe two things quickly on that, because I don't think it comes up anywhere else, is those coders don't have to be people that have done this already elaborately, that study mass communication or know about content analysis. Those coders must be people who you know are will be doing the job thoroughly. They will be committed to what they're doing. But it could be many different people. They should, of course, have some level of literacy, and when they're analyzing election news coverage, it's good to have a basic understanding of what an election is and what the parties are that are out there. But it doesn't require full expertise on the topic necessarily. A bit of knowledge good, or a bit of knowledge, yeah, it would be required actually to understand the contexts in which texts are used. But don't have to be specialists really. Then you would do a coder training. You take your coding scheme, this questionnaire type of thing, and you invite your coders, and you have a number of articles, and have them go over them and record data based on their initial readings, and you talk about difficulties, problems, misunderstandings. You try to revise your instructions, make them clearer, make them less, make them clearer. Then at some point you record data, and we'll come to that in the reliability analysis. But at some point your coders should have an understanding of these instructions that mirrors your understanding and that mirrors each other understanding. And by that you establish this intersubjective data collection, that we all agree on what the data are meaning that come out of this process. The coding scheme, or code book as it's sometimes called, I don't have a strong preference for either, consists of variables, of questions really, again, like survey questions. Here we would call them variables because they're not really survey questions, but consists of these variables, and this variable again is a definable and measurable concept that varies, that has different values for different cases. So is party A mentioned or party B mentioned? What's the favorability of the story towards politician X? Is it very unfavorable towards very favorable? These are types of things we could be doing for such type of analysis. I'm skipping some of this in the interest of time, I think. But again, I mentioned it already. Sometimes it's very easy to identify things. Like if you tell a coder to look for a certain word or a name or whatever, a certain concept that you can pinpoint to by mentioning it basically, it's very easy. Sometimes, you get into situations when you ask coders to read more between the lines. to look for things that I can't thoroughly predefine beforehand by usages of words. Last time for election study we were interested in the character traits newspapers use to describe politicians. And it's like, good leadership, for instance. Yes, I can come up with a few examples of things that would describe good leadership. But I might not be able to do all of that, and I might be forgetting some. And that's where things become a bit more difficult. That's where you move from the coding of very manifest contents to more latent type of contents. For these more latent type of contents, how favorable is the story towards politician X? It does become a bit more difficult actually to achieve intersubjectivity. And your definitions, your instructions need to get much better for this type of content than for this type of content. Much more concise, elaborate, if you want so. We sometimes measure concepts with single items, sometimes with multiple items. I talked to Arif, all about that. And I look at that example in a second. And of course, there will always also be measurement error. So the data you're getting from a content analysis will seldomly be perfect. But neither are data you get from a survey. We looked at how many things would actually influence survey data quality. And there will always be people who answer very much from processing thinking. And the same will be in the content analysis. There will always be error in your data. But our task as researchers is to reduce this error as much as possible, as much as we can. And in order to assess to what degree we were successful in reducing this measurement error, we again turn to the concepts that you should be familiar with by now, validity and reliability. And again, you've seen these basically, so I'm not going to repeat all of that. From your assignments I saw that there was some understanding of this. Oh, now I'm actually in the wrong place. Anyway, we'll get to reliability in a second, sorry. Should I do this now? But anyway, you establish reliability, validity, and then, this operationalization of concepts should be including again, and that's the same as with survey questions. Is the question exhaustive? Does it cover everything you're interested in? Are answer options mutually exclusive? So can you make sure that if you ask a coder to code a certain aspect, that he only needs to take one answer and not more answer options? Again, you take levels of measurement into account in your variables, all of this. So this is an example from a textbook. This was about coding the primary strategy of promotion in promotional material. And the codebook, first of all, has no real instruction here. You see that? This is a very bad example. No instruction here. Nothing's telling the coder what actually to look out for. What is a promotion? What are strategies? It's a bit more specified here than in the answers, but some of this should have been in an instruction here. Bad example. And then you could code no strategy of promotion, more informational than emotional, more emotional than informational. The product is shown, it's problem solving, it's image advertising, and it's product comparison. These are not mutually exclusive. More informational than emotional could show the product. So both would apply, and maybe even a third one would apply. So this is a very bad example of a coding instruction. Yeah? Because here, if you say tell the coder to tick one, you don't know what they're going to get. You don't know what you're going to get. You don't know what they decide to do in the end. And that's not what. Are these exhaustive? So these were not mutually exclusive, right? Are the answer options exhaustive? So the coding instruction for this painting is which colors are shown on the image. And black and white are not colors, by the way. Mark all that apply. And then your answer options are blue, green, yellow, none. See the problem? Exactly, red is missing. You know? This is just a very stupid example for showing that are your answer options exhaustive? Do they cover everything that they would need to cover in order to make the analysis good? There's different ways how to look at variables and how to measure variables, and most of what we do is verbal designations, so we give names to the categories that we're interested in, black, blue, yellow, red, promotional versus, and so on and so forth.
So one of the problems that we often face is that we can't preempt all categories. So as you do content analysis, say you are more than halfway down your complete sample, you discover many more categories that you stumble upon. And that is a big
real problem. That's a real problem.
Because then you can't introduce it mid. That's a big problem.
It's a huge problem.
I just don't know what to do with that.
It
means that
it cannot happen. Exactly.
It would be like
you
do it all over again.
Yeah, exactly. So imagine you say, I want to measure the types of issues in a newspaper. Yeah? And you specify 10 issues. Economic, migration, ethnic tensions, environmental issues. Exactly. And then you start the analysis, and all of a sudden you realize, ooh, there's more issues. Infrastructure, I haven't on the list.
And no matter how good you are, no one can preempt this entire.
But we can take all these things into our coding instrument, so that is very important. So that's what we have done.
No, that is what we have done.
But the problem is you can't do it throughout the process.
So unless you see the whole sample.
Yeah, let me say, but it's a very good point. So you can't, and then you've coded already 100 articles and you realize, oh, infrastructure is missing.
Yeah.
And one coder realizes that actually and adds infrastructure. No! Because, there's 2 other coders who also already coded 100 articles and who might missed infrastructure because it wasn't on the list. Or you yourself even might have missed the infrastructure topic because it wasn't on your list and only got so obvious at some point. And then your data are not valid because you're essentially using 2 different measurement tools throughout the process. It would be like changing the question when I do a survey, when I do the survey. So you can't do it. The only way you can do this is do a thorough pre-testing, pilot testing, and try to, take bits from the sample from various periods and make sure that you cover as much as you can.
Learning the codebook is perhaps more challenging than developing the unit.
Yeah, definitely.
It takes a maximum time.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, devising a good codebook takes months.
Months.
And I think much more challenging than a survey.
For example, our code it took almost 6 months because first we did the pilot study in 2013 various and the elections, and then again we did. And that's where the coder training, when we started, it was just for a week we did, and then we realized 1 week is really not enough. And then we went for 3 weeks of coder training to achieve in the coder reliability,
which we'll be talking about in a second. And I think it's actually harder than doing a survey.
Yeah.
Because for a survey you can rely on a lot of previously tested questions and so on and so forth. For codebooks there's much less publicized information available to actually do that. There's much less standardization of things. So indeed, very good point. This is very important to thoroughly devise this codebook. So this would be a single item measure with name, variable, destinations, thematization of positions in the debate about welfare state services, no reference to welfare state services, neither extension nor cutting back on welfare state services thematized, the extension of welfare state services thematized, cutting back on welfare state services thematized, and extension and cutting are both. Now, this instruction is not very elaborate. You should speak a bit more and define what welfare services are and how you would see that, but just to give you an example of how the categories then could look at. How does the book, I'm skipping that actually. This is just, often these questions are being written down as if in an interview situation, as if it were a survey question. No, this is more of an instruction or a bullet point type of thing. What we usually do in codebooks is that we ask questions to our coders. And you need to see these questions actually, imagine these questions are asked to the text. You're asking that you want information from the text. So pretend you're asking the text something, but just the fact that the text can't speak back to you, you need someone translating that for you, and that's the coder. That's the one who's doing the analysis. And I think that makes it much easier to write this code book, to imagine what are the types of questions I want to ask the text. What information do I want the text to give to me? And then take it from there. So we often ask questions in code books. Does the article mention party ABC? This, you can't read it, I know, and I'm not going to go through it now, but just give you a sample of a code book here. Again, there were links to code books in the material that was sent around earlier last week, and take a look at those. Some of them are very, very elaborately giving these definitions of things, of different things, and you've got a few building blocks in there. So what we looked at now was single item measures. Now you could measure concepts with multiple items as well, as we do in surveys. And we've seen some examples of that works well in quant analysis as well, for the same reason. Measurement error reduction, more precise measurement, covering everything. So Jamieson, important study in the field of political communication. Pell and Jamieson, the spiral of cynicism, big influential study. They're looking at the occurrence of strategy news, the news coverage. And they define strategy news as news that 1, focuses on winning and losing, 2, includes the language of war, games, and competition, 3, contains performers, critiques, and audience, 4, focuses on candidate style and perception, and 5, gives weight to polls and candidate standings. So their measurement of strategic news would include all of that. And it would be very stupid to now have one question in your code book asking whether anything of this occurs. So what you would have for this is probably, at least 5, probably even more items, questions. Does the story refer to winning or losing? That could be one. Does the story refer to language of war? And give examples for what that might be. Or for games, sports, give examples of what that might be. And so on and so forth. So you're looking at multiple item measures here, which is, especially for latent constructs, quite common to do actually.
Or for example, I in the power of news, Hudson tries to measure that news ultimately does not discuss its policy and only discuss outcomes. Something which is very hard to do in terms of actually inferencing from each news item, whether it's looking at policy debates and all of that, or only suggesting outcomes. And then he goes back to discuss the nature of news. So the other way around.
This is the stuff that Ari has been working with. So measurement of frames, attribution of responsibility frame, or human interest frame. Human interest frame would in this case be measured by 5 items here. Does the story provide a human example or human face on the issue? Does the story employ adjectives or personal vignettes that generate feelings or outrage, empathy, caring, sympathy, or compassion? Does the story emphasize how individuals and groups are affected by the issue of problem? Does the story go into the private and personal lives of the actors? Does the story contain visual information that might generate feelings of outrage, empathy, caring, sympathy, or compassion? And all of those together would give you some sense of whether there is a human interest frame employed in a news story. Right? So that's an option one should consider at least, and for many data constructs you would see that that's the case. Code qualification, I already quickly talked about that, so they should have some cognitive abilities. Understanding the task and applying it consistently should be something. They should have some familiarity with the object under study. But they should also have qualifications that occur in actual in wider populations. Because sometimes coders for a year to code something. And then of course they might be producing very reliable data. But it would by no means be possible for some other researcher to take the same code book and another set of coders and come up with the same results. Because they might be so specialized at some point that that's beyond what would allow replication of the study in different settings. And again, it shouldn't not only be the case that your coders all agree on the coding. We all agree on this once now after I give you an instruction. But I should be able to give the instruction to Simon, he goes to the next class, hands it out, and the people there will come up with the same results as well. So replication again. We actually I just wanted to mention this, we just got this accepted in communication methods measures, where we look at crowd workers, again, MTurk, Crowdflower, these types of people, as coders actually. And try to, because I again think that might be an area which will be increasing in the future. That we don't care about employing students and doing elaborate coder trainings anymore, but that we'll use the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of crowd workers out there that are more than happy to get paid 3 cents per sentence when they're doing coding, for instance. So we'll see how that might be a real issue in a couple of years.
I mean, crowd working supposedly is it very necessary just both code to be designed by one coder?
No,
for parts.
No, I think I'm not going to go into this elaborately now, but I think for crowd coding, what you'll do is you have every variable will be measured, differently by different types of people, and just the sheer mass of what you can reach will actually give you some confidence in the results. So what we did in this study, for every measure that we were interested in, and for every sentence that was coded, we had 10 crowd workers coding the sentence throughout. It's not a big study though, but it's just to give an example of what could maybe be happening when you use this a bit more elaborate. You do the coder training, you have master codes for selective example materials, so you take a few articles from your sample, you code them yourself, so you're sure that this is what you think should come out of your descriptions. You invite the coders, explain the codebook to them, go through the examples together. So this is just 3 or 4 articles, and you go through every step of the codebook with this questionnaire type of thing together, discuss problems and so on. Maybe revise this, that often happens. In coder training, I never did a study where I didn't revise the codebook in the coder training. Because that's the moment when you see to what degree are things clear that I've been writing up, or to what degree do I need to adjust and define further, be more concrete in my instructions. Always happens. Interesting that that's like a pilot testing in a survey. That's the cognitive thinking method in survey research, when you look at how do people understand a survey. In a way, it's very simple. Then you have some homework, again a few articles, they should code at home, alone, not together. And then they come back and we discuss what happened there, and whether there are misunderstandings or not, whether there's still need for further clarification. This could be an iterative process, this could be going on for 2 to 3 weeks, which is a reasonable amount of time, I think. So usually we're meeting coders at least 3 or 4 times for coder training, if not more. And that's usually several hours meetings then. And then at some point you think, okay, my coders are ready. Now they're good enough to actually do the task. Now my codebook, my instrument is good enough to do the task. And then you send them home and do a reliability test. And we'll come to that now. So again, this is the coder training stuff. Practice, revise, practice again, discuss, blah, blah, blah. Could be very long. I should not forget you need to pay coders for this process, right? Which sometimes is very annoying because you're in a tight budget for your content analysis, and then a quarter of the budget is gone only for training coders before the real data collection has started. Sometimes even more than that. But there's no way around it. And don't rush through this. This is important. Since we talk about payment now, just also coders should not be paid by the article that they're coding or by the newscast that they're coding, because that's going to make them rush through the material. Oh, the more articles I can do in a small amount of time, the more money I earn, and so on and so forth. They need to be paid by the hour, and they need to be basically told, not to take as long as you can or as you want to. You want to check how quick they are at some point, and also compare how quick they are to tell slow coders maybe to speed up a little bit and not waste your money. But it's something, you know, that you usually have coders do this wherever they want to, so they can be coding at home, which I think is fine. But they shouldn't be forced to rush through. So just give them money by the hour. So and then you have your data at some point. They will, you know, come up with data. There's a data structure. So this is your unit of coding. An article, a newspaper, a movie, a 10-second exit. Of every case here represents your unit of coding, and these are all the variables and measures that you record. You know, which newspaper did the article appear in? On what day did it appear? Was it an editorial or a news piece? Which page? Did it feature party XY? Was it favorable towards that party? And so on and so forth. So that's what the data structure looks like, as with any data structure that we usually work with in social sciences. And then you've got this in Excel, SPSS data, wherever you can start your analysis on that. How do you record the data? How do you get to this data structure? When I did my first content analysis as a student assistant in 2002, we still used paper and pencil. So for every news article, I had a piece of paper, and that had all little boxes in there for every variable, and for every variable I then entered the value on a piece of paper. And after a couple of weeks, I had this stack of paper, which then I had the happy task to enter into a data file. You know, and then you sit days in front of your computer to enter the data. Nowadays, what we usually do is we use these online survey tools that we talked about already. SurveyMonkey, Qualtrics, whatever you have. We actually program our codebook in these. Again, a codebook's very similar to a survey. And then you have the coders recording the data in this data entry mask, which is very nice. They need an internet connection, but other than that, they can work wherever they want to, really. We have the data immediately in your data file, recorded, stored. You know, you can specify things here to make sure that you don't get wrong data. So if a variable only allows entry from 0 to 3, you can specify that at least people cannot enter 4 or anything higher than 4. Very handy to do, and that's what we mostly have been doing now. You can enter data directly into a database. That's very prone to errors, especially when it comes to bigger code books, you know, long lists of variables. And imagine the Excel sheet, you know, you always have to find the right line and scroll back and forth, and it's really annoying. So I would never do this. I would probably not do this anymore, but if at all possible in the context you're working in, I would try to do this. You see, we've not taken a break today, right? We'll just continue for another 35 minutes now, and then we have a short break, and then we'll come to your presentations. You have to bear with me, sorry. We need to assess reliability before we actually start coding, and sometimes also during the coding process. Depends on the size of the project. Are our coders all doing the task the way we want them to do? Do they all agree and generate the same data if they are coding the same material? So if you were my coders now, what I would do for a reliability test, I would all, you know, we did coder training and all that, it's all fine. Now we're at the point where we can do the reliability test finally. I would all give you 30 articles. You have the codebook, you know what to do. Go home, don't speak to each other, and do the coding for those 30 articles. And then you would get me the data, and I would see to what degree you all agree. To what degree you all overlapped in your answers. And ideally you all agree on all variables. So every data point in the data file that one of you entered would be the same as the one that all the others entered. And in such a case we would have a perfect reliability. Never happens. Oh, sometimes happens. It's sometimes, I mean, for easy things like which newspaper was the story published in, or what day was the story published. That's the variables you get 100% reliability. Even for things like was politician A mentioned or politician B mentioned, still fairly easy to get 100% reliability. And for everything which gets a bit more latent or a bit more complicated, you know, like the framing items, human interest framing we just looked at. No, that's hard to reach 100% reliability, but we look at what scores you need. So usually, as soon as you've got more than one coder, you do inter-coder reliability. You compare the reliability between different coders. Sometimes we're in a situation that it's just us coding. In that case, what you definitely should do is consider intra-coder reliability. You code the same material at the beginning of the study and at the end of the study again. And that way you can check whether what you code at the end of the study is still in line with what you did in the beginning. You can look at your own stability over time. It's hard to publish in high-ranking journals with intra-coder reliability only. Because it's still not intersubjective. You can't exclude your own subjectivity and your own biases if you just do it yourself. So ideally, you know, find a friend and buy him a good dinner and have him code 30 articles for you, or 40, or whatever it is. And give him some training, of course, and maybe buy him 2 dinners. But have something, also for little student project, for PhD student project, have something to assess